I was watching one of my friends sent me a video of Laura Eisenhower, the granddaughter of Dwight Eisenhower, the former US president, and also the man that created the Eisenhower camps, the death camps after the Second World War on the Rhine River that killed millions of German men. The death camps that Eisenhower created on the Rhine River at the end of the Second World War. That same Eisenhower. The same Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who apparently had a meeting with Pleiadians who wanted to bring in a peaceful coexistence between the people of our planet and them, the Pleiadians, and he refused because he wanted technology. So he made a deal apparently with the Zeta Reptilians, or the future humans, the transhumanist humans, the Greys. It's up for debate whoever they were, supposedly. This is just information that was passed down to people like Stanton Friedman, who made it quite clear this was what happened. So for me, right away, knowing that information, you can't tar and feather someone because that's the granddaughter of someone who did that. Of course, Dwight D. Eisenhower's speech about the nature of the military-industrial complex when he left the office, the Oval Office, in 1959-60, was pretty interesting too, right? The very thing that he created. He warned President Kennedy and the nation about, the United States nation about. It's pretty interesting. Talk about redemption arc. Fucking hell. But anyway, so I was watching this video from Laura Eisenhower. I've been watching her for a few years. But the one thing that I've learnt from my mystic teacher, one of my mystic teachers, G.G. Young, is discernment. In the last 5 years, I've really been very cautious about who I listen to and the information that comes out of people's mouths around their certainty around particular topics, historical events and timelines, what we consider to be timelines, right? I've really been open to discernment around this information, because to me, the more there is to know, as David Icke famously says, there's always more to know, right? So your point of perception, not belief, perception, moves in regards to information that presents itself to you, and there's always more to know, and question everything. How many researchers do you know? To Laura Eisenhower's credit, she did say, take what I'm sharing with you in regards to her talk. Take whatever resonates with you, whatever doesn't resonate with you, leave it, right? To her credit. But David Icke is classic for this, because he says, question everything, including what I'm saying. How many researchers do you know within this field of spirituality and consciousness expansion and truth-telling in regards to the nature of reality, which includes our historical precedent in regards to how we got to where we are and what happened before this moment, right? How many of these researchers have you ever heard them say, question everything I'm saying, or use discernment about what I'm sharing with you, or take what you want from this talk? Most just bring out facts. Their facts, which they've often, a lot of these claims that they make have got no backing at all. There's nothing, no information, no evidence to report what they're saying has any validity at all. They just blurt it out like it's truth, right? Without these huge claims, without any anything that you can validate, in any way at all you can validate what they're saying. There's nothing to validate what they say, right? It's all just spat out. And a lot of this information for me over the years, I've looked at this information, I'm going like, well, if you read my books, the books that I've written with Amon Sueño, from Sanctum to Entwined to the bookend of my Shadow and Soul series, which is Entwined, is the first novel I wrote in 2008, to United, which I wrote in 2014-15, published it in 2016. If you look at those books, all the books in between there as well, I give a lot of information that I've channeled as well through my working with Lord Buford Somerset, another part of myself and a level of existence, my oversoul being in another form, right? I've worked with Lord Beaufort Somerset to write horror macabre short stories, dark erotic fantasy short stories, peered into some very, very dark places, and then did my best in my own shadow work to present that to people to read, to say this is actually happening. So once you bring it into light, you feel it to heal it, right? And which is a quotation from Dr. David Hawkins, and I hear Laura Eisenhower saying it quite a lot in this talk, which I found interesting because she doesn't cite where she got the information from in regards to feeling it to heal it. Feel it to heal it, to me, is David Hawkins, and I would cite that if I was using it. That's just me. That's where I heard it first. There's a karaeria, there's a hawk flying over where I am right now, looking for food. Amazing. So, and it's purveying, bird's eye view over the area. So I'm looking at this, making this video with a bird's eye view of information that's coming in at this moment, and talking about discernment and questioning everything, including what I wrote, right? So Pablo Wairoa, on the flip side of that coin, the light side of that coin, heartfelt, spiritual short stories with beautiful fables that tell you, give you lessons on how to live your best life, right? And give examples how to live your best life in ways that are so deeply imaginative. And then there's, like I said before, Amon Sueño, my novelist who I work with, who wrote Sanctum. With me, we together wrote Sanctum, Entwined and United. And these are parts of my oversoul and other forms, other bodies. And they're like overlays. When I'm writing with them, it's like an overlay over my form or me over them. And we write together, we collaborate together. But I don't put my name down in these books, I put down their names when I'm writing these books, because to me, I'm simply a conduit for some information that's coming out of me. But I was listening to Laura Eisenhower talk about these, this timeline that she was talking about, right? This timeline in regards to, I've heard it before. Christoph Melchizedek sort of has also explained the same timeline as well, and his teachings come from a very different place to hers. I think they come from a very different place. Where she's coming from, where Christoph is coming from, it's the same information, but I've heard it in a different presentation, right? Presented differently, with the same information. And when I was hearing her speak, I was sitting in my van driving, listening to her talk, and I was listening and going like, I wrote all this information, what she was saying. I wrote this in 2006-7 and published it in 2008, 9-10. I was channeling all this information. I was reading about 5 or 6 books in 2006 to 2008 to assist me to fill in the blank spots where I couldn't get the information at the time because I didn't have the skill or the nuances or the ability to tune into what was then I thought was the Akashic record, and now many years later my understanding through David Icke's work and my perception, and I feel this to be true, and this came to me funnily enough through Robert Temple's book, A New Science of Heaven. We talked about the Kordylewski clouds between the Earth and the Moon, these huge plasma clouds that he believed to be, he feels through his research that they could be enormous data centers, I guess you could say, living organisms that collect data for millions of years of what's happened on this planet, right? Enormous quantum living computers that have collected data from what's happened on this planet and recorded information from the entire solar system for millions of years between the Earth and the Moon. These enormous clouds, these enormous plasma clouds. And when I was writing my books, my books in regards to me writing from 2008 to 2016, I was channeling all this information about the nature of reality, the paradigm shift coming in my perception in my book. When I wrote the book in United, I had a pretty clear picture that the paradigm shift would happen sooner rather than later, but it would still be in the late 2020s, early 2030s. But I was writing these books and channeling these books with Amon Sueño, Entwined and United, but more United. When when Laura Eisenhower was talking about the nature of the Saturn Moon matrix, which David Icke brought into the vernacular, I guess you could say the vernacular, or in the alternative spiritual conscious awareness, consciousness expansion truth movement, he was the one that I first heard the nature of the Saturn Moon matrix. And then again, she just said the same thing in her talk, and she didn't cite it, whether she had heard it before somewhere else or she brought it into her own vernacular, her own vocabulary, her own work, without citing David Icke's work. To me, it's like, well, if you have heard it from Icke first, why wouldn't you cite it? That's just a big thing for me. Once again, it's plagiarism. If you're taking someone else's information, I'm not saying that she is, but if you're taking someone else's information and you're making it your own and saying Saturn, Earth, Moon, Matrix. When I was writing these books, I was channeling this information into my books, especially the last book, United. I was really deep because I've had almost 14 years of practice of doing this work, of being a creative author and a creative imaginist and a channel for this information. It was like it became second nature for me. So it would just come compounding in when I was working my interior exterior decorating work, my painting work, and at work it would just keep coming in. I'd get look here, look there, look there, look here, look here, look there, and it'd be like literally, I'd be hearing the whole day clear audio messages to go look over here, look over there, and all the information would come compounding in, and I'd go home after working 8 to 10 hour days and then spend 4 to 7 hours at night time till like often till 2 in the morning working, researching and writing and then I'd go into full channel mode and I'd be writing on a computer almost like with my eyes closed, just writing, my eyes rolling back in my head, writing out information, and in that process I'd finish like 15-20 pages and then wouldn't even know I'd actually written those pages. And I'd read the information and go like, holy shit, because I'd just gone through an entire process of writing 15-20 pages and I don't even remember most of it. I was in this state of like deep flow state. So when I was writing this information, I felt like I was tapping into something, into an energy, into a reservoir of information, and I was seeing, because when I write, I'm fully immersed. I'm in a full immersion process. Like I'm a method actor, but as a creative artist, creative imaginist, my method acting process is that I'm deeply immersed in the experience of what I'm doing. Every single sense that you have in a body, smell, sight, hearing, touch, taste, everything. I'm feeling it all. I'm experiencing everything. Every character all at the same moment. I'm experiencing everything all at once, what I'm writing about. So as I'm going through this process, I'm literally bringing in all this information. I'm experiencing it in real time as I'm writing it out. And when I finished writing these books, I'm like, where did this information come from? I mean, I knew about the Akashic record from Edgar Cayce's work and Rudolf Steiner's work about tapping into the Akashic. And it would be years later when I read David Icke's books, the Reality Trilogy, the Trap, the Dream, and the Reveal, his perception that the Akashic record is basically a form of AI, right? As a form of AI that plays itself out, I guess, in my interpretation of what he was saying, is that the information that the AI collects and the programs that it runs through this simulation is interactive with the people that are in the simulation, right? The spirit, the divine spark that are given programs from the OS to come into the simulation, and if those programs aren't hacked through the heart vortex by infinity, by all there is, ever has been, and never will be, then those programs play themselves out, and therefore the AI has the programs all on hard drives. And the hard drives, the cloud, as above, so below, is the Kordylewski clouds. Between the Earth and the Moon. And those two living plasma fields of, I guess you could say, data storage, is where I was getting my information from to write these books on some level. But then I began to tap beyond that into infinity. I began to tap through, I began to plug in to infinity at the end of United, because the paradigm shift that I wrote about in the book, which bookends my Shadow and Soul series, the book series, the Shadow and Soul series, the book United is the book that bookends that 12 book series. Even though I published it in 2016, it still bookends the other 3 books that came after it. That book, the last part of it especially, I was tapping into something beyond the simulation, so to speak. I can see that now, looking at it. And what Laura Eisenhower was saying in her talk, a lot of what she was saying I had already written about 10 years ago. And she might have known this knowledge 10 years ago too, but she's presenting it in a talk as recently as this year, I believe, I think. But I found it fascinating because it's like, well, the information's all there for everyone to access if it's in the Akashic, if it's in the AI, the interdimensional AI, as David Icke says. But once you get beyond, if you move your point of attention into your heart vortex, and from there you begin to channel information from all that is, ever has been, and ever will be, your experience goes, your perception, your channeling work, the information coming in is a very different point of origin, and therefore it isn't in the Kordaluski clouds, if that's where I was getting the information from in the first place, which would be the cloud as above, so below, the cloud that's been built for the data storage in our realm, right? Which isn't that interesting? The data storage in our realm is called the cloud, this field of awareness. And then we have, as above, so below. And we have the Kordaluski clouds, as Robert Temple says, could potentially be these enormous storage centers for billions of years of data, right? It's fascinating. That makes perfect sense, right? If you look at it that way, from that kind of open, no, I wouldn't say mind, because I don't think it's open mind, open perception. But for me, the discernment, it comes back to the discernment. Now knowing what I know, because like David Icke says, there's always more to know. Knowing what I know now about the nature of what he perceives reality is what it's really, how it really exists, right? What it is, and the simulated reality that we're in. Because I have also my mystical teacher, G.G. Young, who says that we're not in a simulation, and the Rosicrucian mystery school knowledge says we're actually living inside of a gigantic, we're inside, existing inside, having the perception of our point of awareness inside of a gigantic living being. And isn't a simulation, it's a gigantic living being, which is like even more stupendous than the idea of living in a simulation, right? So, and she says use your own discernment in regards to what she's saying as well, because you've got 2 people and enormous influences in my perception of what we call reality. David Icke and G.G. Young having very different discordant perceptions on the nature of reality. One, we're living in a gigantic being, the other one, we're living in a simulation. So I've seen information that purports both. I've seen more information that purports that we're existing, our point of awareness is inside of a simulation, than I've seen that we're living in a gigantic living being. But I just came across an article by Bibhu Dev Misra, who quite clearly, with his own research says, and he makes a pretty strong argument, well, not argument, but it's pretty strong information. He shows the correlation between amoebas, bacterias, and algae and comets. There's a correlation between what they do, how they act, what environment they're in. The changing in their colour. I'll do a video on this at some point as well, because it was an incredible read. How they move through the solar system, through our galaxy, or through our solar system, what they emit, how they change colour. And I finished the article today, reading the article. It's a quite a long article. I finished reading it today, and it's like, well, it makes kind of sense. If we're living inside of a gigantic living being, then we're going to have little amoebas and bacteria and algae living inside that being as well, like living inside of our own bodies. We're going to have amoebas and bacteria and protozoa and organisms living in our body that act exactly the same way, right? As above, so below. So once again, it comes back to this notion of discernment and curiosity and having your perception and knowing that there's always more to know. Thanks for watching. I truly appreciate it. Mā te ua. Oh, I'll see you again soon.